folks, and welcome back to Four Corners of the Galley. I'm your host, PBO, and you're joining me on another edition of Totally Binging. But with a little twist. I've decided that with the brand new show, Unsolved, the murders of Biggie and Tupac Shakur, I wanted to do, instead of waiting to the end of the season and do a breakdown of how the season works, I wanted to do an episode-by-episode breakdown of this wonderful show. After the success of People vs. O.J. Simpson last year, which was one of the most amazing shows ever made, and the very intriguing success of the assassination of Giovanni Versace, where I'm halfway through, and a very intriguing story, and I'll do that on a total binge. I wanted to do a little more credence. Obviously, because the biggest reason is because I'm a huge fan of Biggie and Tupac. I mean, I grew up during this time. I lived in L.A. My whole life from the 80s and 90s, so I kind of saw a lot of the different stuff, and I knew some people that kind of were in and around some of these camps. So I'm extremely enthralled by the whole story, and I wanted to do a breakdown. So today we're doing episode 1, Whatever It Leads. So, the show starts off with a very unique take where it kind of gives you. I like how it starts off. It starts off in 1997. Sorry, because I specifically remember when that happened. 1997, the day that Biggie was killed, and it starts off kind of like in the movie Notorious, where he's having a phone conversation with his mom and talking about how he's staying in L.A. with Puffy to keep promoting his new album Life After Death instead of going to Paris. And it's kind of very reminiscent of Notorious. It's got very showing this kind of same thing, and it kind of just shows you his conversation, and then it jumps all the way to 2006. So what I will say, I admit at the beginning, is the first 15 to 20 minutes of the show is really hard to get a good grasp on what they're trying to do. They jump from year to year so fast, and they show you what year they're jumping to, and then once they get those jumps done and they show you where the people are and they put them in place, then they don't really show you what year they're jumping back and forth at that point. They expect you to understand based on the people that are in that in those scenes. So the way it sets up is, in the first 10 minutes, it jumps real fast, so I just kind of got to go through what it jumps through. So it does that, goes to 2006, and it shows Josh Duhamel, who's playing Detective Kading, and he's now being given the Biggie Smalls murder because Miss Wallace has filed a lawsuit against the LAPD for $400 million, so now they have to take it very serious, so they actually reopened the case in 2006. Then it jumps back to 1997, and it's 9 days after Biggie, and it shows something that I never knew exactly what happened, which was very intriguing, which was the officer-on-officer shooting of Gaines, and I forget the other gentleman, but Gaines was killed by another officer in an officer-on-officer shooting when they both didn't realize they were officers, and that was crazy. And it's so unique to see how something that happens afterward and how it all kind of ties back to the main story. And that's what I think I really loved about what this show did right in the first episode, was you could see that they're planting the seeds for the future episodes in this show. They're just kind of putting people in places. The two biggest things I think I got out of all this was, one, the relationships. This whole show is going to be about the relationships. They've grouped together two people in each of the different scenarios, and I really like it. Let's start off with Biggie and Tupac. So you got Pac, played by Mark Rose, who actually played Pac in the Straight Outta Compton movie, so that's really cool, and he's actually doing a phenomenal job with Pac. I must admit, I really feel the energy that he's giving off. It feels like Pac. It feels like the mentor, the preacher Pac, the one that was about social justice and human rights and getting things together and people being equal. I mean, he does a real good job of it. And then you got a newcomer in Wazy Jones playing Biggie, and he got that Biggie voice, and I like the way he looks and the personification he brings off, so that's cool. So you got those two gentlemen basically in their grouping together, and it looks like, based on the scenes that we've seen, that we're going to see them in a lot of their scenes together, basically to show this relationship between Pac and Biggie and how it started so fruitfully, where Biggie meets him out here in LA for, after he's out here just kind of in the beginning in like 1991. It's a little different than Notorious, where they show him that he met him in Atlanta on tour with Puffy. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell what's real and what's not true as far as what story is right, but basically the same introduction happened where he meets him right at the beginning when he's doing Party and Bullshit. Then the second relationship that they create is the 1997 relationship, which is Detective Poole, played by Jimmy Simpson, who I must say so far is absolutely killing this role as Detective Poole, and then his partner, played by Jamie McShane, playing Miller. And they put these two together, and it's basically, these are the two officers that take on the case that are at robbery and homicide in the main downtown, and they're the ones who are going to take over this case and really push it to the brink. And the best part that you can see from these two people is basically the extreme amount of racial overtones that is played out in this show. I mean, it's extremely big how the racial overtones are coming across. You have Detective Poole, who really seems like he's fighting, like he's a play by numbers, do the right thing, do your job, and if you do it correctly, you'll catch the bad guys and things will work out. And then you have Miller, who's more of that classic LA cop, he's definitely very racist and just calling out people the way they are. They have this great exchange where they talk about the Cosby Kid to Biggie, and that's just nuts how they basically compare it and try to contrast it. And the only reason it makes so much bigger is because the Cosby Kid and how Cosby is personified now. Then you have the 2006 relationship, which is the current standard timeline that they're in, and you have Detective Katie, who's played by Josh Duhamel, and Detective Dupree, who's played by Bokeem Woodbury. Fantastic things. So they definitely show they're going to have 3 different timelines or 3 different sections that they're going to go to, and it's all going to be about the relationships between these two individuals and the way they interact with all the different stuff. Beautifully done. I like the way they set it up. I think it's great for the future, so you kind of know where you're going to be going and how everything is going to be working once you get there. Really love that. Another thing I really love is when they really get into the meat of the whole story and how Biggie was killed, and they use a lot of the live footage that actually was there that I've never seen in my life. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. I mean, that was some really, really cool stuff. I love the real footage. I love the stories that you really didn't know about. I love basically everything we saw with Pac and Biggie was things that we never knew about. Things that only they were privy to, or their closest friends or homies that were around them got to see. And you really see the true nature of how they are just two kids. And that's kind of like the one thing that Officer Dupree, Bokeem Woodbury, says at the end of the episode is Biggie was 24 and Pac was 25, and they were just kids. And it kind of shows them that they were just two big rich kids running around having a good old time. I mean, that was absolutely great. So I really like the way that they set up the relationships, and I really like the way they show the racial overtones and how it was wild and crazy. I mean, I was a teenager in the 90s. I grew up, went to school here, and it was wild. I mean, the 90s in LA was the wild, wild west. Gangs ran this place. It was crazy. There was always some nonsense or something crazy going on in the streets, and you definitely feel that greatness. What I also loved about it is they really show the inner workings of the police department and how things happen, and how basically some of them don't want to take on the job, or some of them are gung-ho about him, but most of them just really don't want to get their names messed up. I mean, the one guy solves the Gaines murder, and then they get handed the Biggie, and he's already freaking out. What? This is our reward? I get the Biggie? I mean, this just shows you how amazing and how it all connects together. Then what they really start to show is the pieces they're starting to put together and how they come up with this assumption. When they go after this guy that was at the party with Biggie and Puff, who's Keithy Anderson, Keithy Davis, when they go after him, and then you get that little, when he goes in, and then you find out that his uncle was Orlando Anderson. Wow, I felt like that was a mic drop at the end of the episode, because if you know anything, the whole fight that happened in Vegas with Pac and the guy, and he jumps him, that was Orlando Anderson who jumped. So, I mean, I thought for years that Orlando Anderson was the one that killed Pac. It was Crips versus Blood, some classic 90s stuff that happened, and that's exactly how it went down. But the fact that they just dropped all that in there is just fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I felt like this was a great start to the season. It gave us what it was. It was a little wonky at the beginning, where you're trying to figure out so much of the story, so you're really trying to get there, and you're trying to figure out where it's at. But once they really, really dive deep and they finally put these guys in their positions and they teamed up, I feel like it really took another turn. Also want to give, I do not remember the actress' name, but I will get that right, for Mrs. Wallace. That speech she gives to Detective Poole, I love that speech. It was great. She's basically telling him, like, look, I don't know what you've heard or what you understand or what you think, but everything that you hear in the media and all that stuff about the rap war and all that nonsense is nonsense. Biggie and Pac were friends, and that's what needs to be said. I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. Well, there you go, folks. Episode 1, where it leads. of Unsolved, the Biggie and Tupac murders. All right. Well, there you go. That was just a good introduction. We'll definitely get deeper and do a deeper dive on the next one, and we'll just keep going and do a little recap. Hey, man, tell me what you think. Leave some comments down below. All right. So until next week, guys, good night, Ted.